So welcome to this lecture on maritime security cooperation between India and ASEAN, and we are privileged to have Vice Admiral Pradeep Chauhan. Since we are already 5 minutes late, so we would like to start. I would like to call upon the stage our whole panelists, starting with Admiral Chauhan, DG RIS Sachin Kumar Sharma, Chari Sir, Professor Chintamani Mahapatra, and Dr. Kshatriya. So without any further ado, I would request our Director General, Professor Sachin Kumar Sharma, to formally welcome you all in this seminar. So sir, over to you.
Good evening everyone, and thank you for being here. I first of all thanks Vice Admiral Pradeep Chauhan ji, Professor Chintamani Mahapatra, Professor Dr. Seshadri Chari, our Governing Council member, Kshatriya ji, Pankaj, for organizing this very important event. I will not take much time, 2 or 3 points about RIS and AIC and CMEC. RIS is a think tank which work under the Ministry of External Affairs. We are working with the different line ministries such as Ministry of Shipping, Ministry of Ayush. We are also closely working with the Ministry of Agriculture and Ministry of Commerce and Ministry of Finance. Now we are also expanding more. We are working also closely with other ministry as well. Within the RIS, we are the center, ASEAN India Center at RIS. So this is the initiative taken by Dr. Pankaj Vasist along with Dr. Kshatriya ji. We are coordinator with the CMEC. CMEC is a center which is we have opened with partnership with the Ministry of Port and Shipping. So here just 2 or 3 points which I think maybe the Admiral Pradeep Chauhan ji, Vice Admiral Pradeep Chauhan, he is going to discuss these 2 or 3 points, that how can India and ASEAN further strengthen maritime cooperation, and how can partnership with Singapore and Vietnam contribute to a more resilient and secure region? And the last, how can maritime cooperation evolve to address both traditional and emerging challenges? I will not spend more time on the formalities, and I would like that Professor Chintamani Mahapatra, please, over to you. Please carry on. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that introduction, Professor Sharma. Namaskar, good evening to all of you. Today I'm so happy that I've been invited to chair a session and listen to Vice Admiral Pradeep Chauhan, who is the right person to talk about the topic in this evening. But just as an intro, about 46 years ago, I began doing research on ASEAN. And about 35 years ago, I produced a book on the American role in the birth and evolution of ASEAN. From then on, I have been watching the evolution of ASEAN almost every year. It has evolved in such a direction that you can get a glimpse of how it has evolved. 1967, 8th of August, it was announced in Bangkok. In 1976, in the Manila conference, the chairman made a statement that after 20 years of evolution, ASEAN is yet to take off. It was a pretty slow progress of ASEAN. Now, only after writing my book, by doing a lot of research in the archives in the United States and UK, where I wanted to use the document and show that how Washington, D.C. played the role of a midwife in the birth of ASEAN, I came to know in a conference in GNU when somebody from MEA retired, he claimed, we don't have any documentary evidence, he claimed that when ASEAN was initiated in 1967, even India was approached. They called India and said, why don't you become a member? India did not become a member. After writing the book, I realized it was a good decision at that time. But later, it was no longer possible for India to get into ASEAN. But as ASEAN began to do very well, even economically and otherwise, and the entire globe focused attention on ASEAN, then India at the time was not able to interact with ASEAN because of the Cold War factors. It's only after the end of the Cold War that India began to interact with ASEAN, first sectoral dialogue partner, then full dialogue partner. Now you have the ASEAN-India Summit. It has evolved in a very positive direction. It is one of the most significant pillars of India's Act East policy. Now today, when we are going to discuss about the maritime cooperation between ASEAN and India, it is because our Prime Minister made an announcement. The entire 2026 is going to be the year of ASEAN-India maritime cooperation. And we don't have a better person to speak on this than Vice Admiral Pradeep Chauhan. Without taking any more time, I'll request him to give the keynote address. And after that, some of my colleagues in the dais will also make some observations. Then we'll open it up for open Q&A and brief comments. Thank you very much. Let me request Vice Admiral, the floor is yours, sir.
Thank you so much. My gratitude to the RIS and particularly to the Director General, Professor Sharma, and all the learned professors on this panel and my colleagues from the Navy whose graciousness has allowed me to be here. All right, so this topic that I'm going to dwell upon is actually quite a large topic, and we have very little time. So I'm going to speak at high speed staccato, hoping that I can compress time in that manner. But if you find that my accent is not particularly intelligible, this is a good time now to say so. But can you hear me at the back? And I am okay? You can understand what I'm saying at this speed? Okay. So I'm going to start by concentrating upon India and then allowing it to grow upwards and outwards to encompass first Singapore and then Vietnam and more broadly ASEAN itself. Let me start with the end state. What do we want at the end of it all? So as far as India is concerned, our end state is the economic, material and societal well-being of the people of India. And I dare say you cannot find a more fundamental statement than that. And in striving for this end state, within the context of external engagement as opposed to that which is being done internal to the country, India, of course, enunciates a set of geo-economic goals and a set of non-geo-economic goals. Some of the illustrative examples of India's geo-economic goals are now on your screen. We want to become, our goal is to become an advanced country, Viksit Bharat, by 2047. We want to move from a $4 trillion economy to a $30 trillion economy, both in nominal terms, within a period of 25 years. This is quite an ask. We want to be able to reduce our national and regional wealth inequality, transition from a brown economy to a blue economy. I'm very careful about what I'm saying here because the RIS is filled with economists, and I've spent 7 years of my life trying to rescue the blue economy from economists. And to be able to say that we are using the wrong term here, because instead of this adjective noun thing which enables us to be completely confused between an ocean economy and a blue economy, perhaps we ought to be able to use a better verb-object combination and talk about bluing the economy rather than worrying about whether we have a blue economy or a green economy or a brown economy. So bluing the economy will make sure that even Delhi starts to worry about what is happening to the oceanic spaces around it. So these are our geo-economic goals. Our non-geo-economic goals are equally salient. I don't have an exhaustive listing, of course, but you can see that our non-geo-economic goals incorporate the sustenance of our territorial integrity, our cartographic identity, build our prestige and reputation for wise and sagacious regional leadership, and so on and so forth. Once a desired end state, this is a little bit of teaching grandma to suck eggs here, but if you'll forgive my dwelling on some basics, once a desired end state is given written expression, it becomes known as a statement of policy. And India has several statements of policy because we have several policies. And one of those policies is our maritime policy. And in the maritime policy, India's statement of policy is encapsulated in the acronym Mahasagar. So Mahasagar is not a vision. I find it very hard to accept the common literature usage of the term vision, the Mahasagar vision. It's not a vision. It's our policy in the maritime domain. We truly believe that the Indian economy cannot ride upon some crest while the economies of our neighborhood are wallowing in some trough. For us to rise, they must rise. For us to be secure, they must be secure. And therefore, Mahasagar is an apt, appropriate acronym. And in diagrammatic terms, it actually represents our DIME, our diplomatic, our informational, our military, our economic outreach to the region. And this is what Mahasagar is actually. So when we talk about security, we need to be quite clear about what kind of security are we talking about. And we are usually on fairly shaky grounds here because we tend to believe that the word security implies military security, probably why I am here in the first place. But this is completely incorrect because the government of India, in common with most governments around the world, recognizes that there are several dimensions of security, of which military security is one. It might be the most important one, but nevertheless it is still only one. And there are several other dimensions that are available on your screen. So, security is clearly more than military security alone, and maritime is certainly more than the Coast Guard Navy amalgam. Certainly. And so the now let me come to India's, with that against that backdrop, let me come to India. The fundamental cartographic identity of India, this geopolitical entity called India, as also its territorial integrity, this will always need land power, so that when you look at a map, you are able to recognize this is India, and not some truncated fashion that is India. So land and aerospace power are going to be required all the time so that the army, in short, will deliver India. Then the trouble is that the next 200 years are going to be centuries of the sea and of space, both outer space and cyberspace. And in the course of these 200 years, India is either going to be a maritime and a space power, or, ladies and gentlemen, India is not going to be any kind of power at all. This is the stark choice before government. So our challenge will always be, how do we achieve the right balance between our maritime and our land-based geopolitical imperatives in an era of geopolitical uncertainty? So that's the policy. Now people ask me frequently, Admiral, this Sagar policy has been around for 10 years, what's happening in it? And many young people ask me this, and I keep asking them, what have you been smoking? Whatever it is, it's bad stuff. Go to some place, get properly delusional. Don't buy BD and be delusional on the cheap. Nothing is happening in a policy because a policy is a statement of your desired end state. However, you do need to give first order, second order, third order specificity to your policy, and first order specificity to India's maritime policy of Mahasagar is provided by the Indo-Pacific Oceans Initiative, the IPOI. It is a pity that our government has put IPOI in the form of 7 pillars. You should never use pillars, because pillars imply silos, silos imply my pillar, my turf, your turf. And so we never, in the NMF, we never depict them as pillars. We show them as 7 spokes of a deeply interconnected web. You cannot do any one of them unless you do all of them. So several nations, as you know, have already volunteered to lead one or more of these 7 maritime lines of thrust. India doesn't figure in all of them. Can you see that? That's because this is not some grand Indian plan which you can join or not join or refuse or accept or reject. This just says, hi guys, there are 7 lines of thrust. Do you have anybody's got any ideas? And then some country or the other gets up and says, me, I have an idea. We say, great, you want to follow us? Huh? He says, no, you don't want to follow us. You would like us to follow you. No. Okay. You want us to go hand in hand. No. You don't want us there at all. Anything will do. Preferably not the last one. But anything will do so long as we get the job done. This is the beauty of the IPOI. And because it's a new creature, it causes chaos in the stratified minds of some of our region's more illustrious people. So our maritime vision is, of course, quite clearly, maritime security vision is that of providing a secure and safe maritime environment as one of the primary enablers of that Viksit Bharat. Please be advised that there is a big difference between defense and security. So I'm a defense officer, at least I was, and I am quite clear about the fact that we have only 3 defense forces. We have a large number of armed forces. Okay, without going into too much pedantic stuff. What is our principal maritime interest? Our principal maritime interest is stated at the prime ministerial level. It is holistic maritime security. I cannot emphasize the adjective holistic strongly enough. It is freedom from threats arising in the sea, or from the sea, or through the sea. And those threats could be man-made ones, which you're familiar with here in this auditorium. You're familiar with the natural ones. We are the locus of more than 60% of the world's natural disasters. And then we have combinations such as climate change, ocean acidification, areas beyond national jurisdiction, biodiversity beyond national jurisdiction, and so on. When you are free from this, you have maritime security. And therefore, your endeavor in partnership as well as individually must be to attain this degree of freedom. So then we have the geographical context, and for us, the Indo-Pacific is our geographical context. It is a predominantly, but certainly not exclusively, maritime space. Zyada tez ja raha hu? It's okay? You can follow this? Okay, good. Thank you so much. So India's concept of the Indo-Pacific has been articulated once again at the prime ministerial level, and it is a predominantly maritime space that stretches from the east coast of Africa all the way to the western shores of the Americas, in not the United States of America alone. And north-south starts from the southern coasts of the Eurasian continent and goes all the way down to Antarctica. This is a big space, so people ask me, Admiral, that's a huge space. Do you have any resources, Resources, huh? So what should we say? What should we say? I don't know. We say, what should we do, guys? Should we cut our coat according to our cloth, as Mummy and Daddy taught us? Or should we weave our cloth according to the coat that we want? And he says, Wah, Angrezi to aati hai. It's a great turn of phrase, but it still needs resources. Do you have resources? And here, it's very important for all of us here to be able to understand the difference between capacity and capability. Regrettably, one more term which we use interchangeably to our great peril. Capacity is material wherewithal. Ship, aircraft, dockyard, hospital, this hall, headquarters building, submarine, all this is capacity. Capability is the human skill, the human ingenuity, the human training, the legal framework that will maximize whatever capacity you have. Take this hall, take any building, take any hospital, take a hospital that has got CAT scans, X-rays, PET scans, the works. Fill it with idiots. You've got great capacity and zero capability. Now, we might not have spare capacity to the degree that some of our colleagues have in this world. But we certainly have an enormous amount of capability. And therefore, we must play to our strong suit. What's the use of lamenting the fact that I don't have that aircraft carrier, or I don't have this ship, or I don't have that submarine, or I don't have this? What do you have? Play with that suit. And so we must play to our strengths, not simply ape the strengths of others, which might well be weaknesses of our own. Finally, we have 9 maritime objectives down that cascading list, and we have much interaction with both Vietnam and Singapore. And I've only just come back from Singapore. I'm only just about to enter a dialogue with the Diplomatic Academy of Vietnam, and we keep saying, what are yours? These are ours. What are yours? If you haven't formulated them, would you like, if your government hasn't formulated them, okay, no problem. Can a think tank formulate them? Guys, Delhi is full of think tanks. Not all of them are thinking. Many of them are tanking. It is not enough for us to have think tanks. It is only sufficient if our think tanks think. This is why I hold the RIS in such high esteem. It is a think tank that thinks. So too is the NMF. And these are our 9 maritime objectives. This is the objectives that we are seeking. I'm not going to run down them because I'm sure that you will be able to speed read them if I speak really slowly and quietly. Okay, take a minute. Good? Okay. Now, from there we come down to our strategies. We have strategies for peace, strategies for tension, strategies for conflict. Today I'm going to talk to you about the strategies for peace and our partnerships in that regard. Currently we are concentrating upon 5 major but very different approaches for our endeavors vis-a-vis constructive engagement, which is our fundamental strategy. That's what brings us into ASEAN. this concept of constructive engagement. So in the Indian Ocean, there are a series of strategic constructs, and very many people who used to ask me, I say this Indian Ocean, no, there is not enough structure in it. Look at this, it's like a noodle soup bowl. And it's got everything in it chronologically arranged. I could have shown this to you sequentially. It looks impressive, but we'll run out of time. What about on the other side, in the Pacific? As a follow-through from our Act East policy, remember, policy, statement of desired end state. Here, we are, apart from the ASEAN +3, India figures in every one of the constructs which are mostly ASEAN-centric and ASEAN-led. And if you look at the internal, the smaller boxes of MIST, which is actually Malaysia, Indonesia, Singapore, and Thailand, the MSSI, which is the Malacca Strait Security Initiative, the Indo-Malfi, which is Indonesia, Malaysia, Philippines doing anti-piracy and anti-robbery patrols. Apart from that, in the major constructs, India figures everywhere. What should we then do with this figuring everywhere? We're there. Then what should we say to one another? So every regional security structure must have at least 3 layers, a conceptual layer, a political layer, and an executive layer, which will finally do the doing. Because it's all very well to have these conversations. Finally, somebody has to go to sea and do the stuff. So the conceptual layer, I think, is an amalgam of the Mahasagar and IPOI. The political layer in the Indian Ocean, which is the western segment of the Indo-Pacific, it is not to be referred to as the Indian Ocean alone. You must be able to use that western segment of the Indo-Pacific. Otherwise, what's the use of talking about the Indo-Pacific? And so one option is to use the IORA as a political layer. The other option is to use the East Asia Summit, which is a leaders-led summit, and you're familiar with it. This is the political layer options, but the executive layer, there's no option. The executive layer is going to be an amalgam between the Indian Ocean Naval Symposium, the Indian Navy has just resumed chair of that particular organization, and the Western Pacific Naval Symposium. And the ones in the middle of this Venn diagram, Australia, Bangladesh, France, India, Indonesia, Malaysia, Pakistan, Singapore, and Thailand, they are lying in both. Therefore, our job is to make sure we can leverage this. Our second approach, I've already mentioned, is the Indo-Pacific Oceans Initiative. No need to belabor this any further. Our third approach is through minilaterals such as BIMSTEC and trilaterals. We know the BIMSTEC story. We are familiar with that. Let's look at the trilaterals. We have 7 trilaterals in the maritime domain. India, USA, Japan, India, Japan, Italy, India, Indonesia, Australia, India, Australia, France, India, France, the UAE, India, Brazil, South Africa, and the 5 countries that form the Colombo Security Conclave. Guys, look at the diagram. Where is Malaysia? Where is Vietnam? Where's Singapore? Where is Vietnam and Singapore? Where are they? And why aren't they there? So we need to be able to figure this out, and moving forward in this year of ASEAN-India maritime cooperation, at least in the maritime sphere, we need to establish strong, symbiotic, enduring relations. Our fourth approach is, of course, the Quad. I'm not going to dwell on the Quad because it's too well known. I only wanted to emphasize the fact that the Quad is doing the IPMDA, which is really quite important. MDA should not be confused with MSA. MDA is an aspirational term, maritime domain awareness. Not a sparrow falls, but you know. In the meanwhile, you have to be satisfied with maritime situational awareness. But in India, this has not got enough currency. So let me go straight to say that now in this particular region of ours, there are a very large number of information fusion centers, and now it's our challenge is how do we fuse these information centers together? So our fifth approach is the proactive promotion of connectivity. Hey, I want to say this. Can I leave this whole thing and come over here? I'm hopeless at this mic business. So you know Lutyens Bangalore zone, right? You live in Delhi. So what is the great measure of success? You get invited to Lutyens Bangalore zone party. How do you get invited?
So it is getting recorded, sir.
Oh, it's getting recorded.
So we are getting mic for you, sir.
Yes, sir. No, I'm done. I'm done. Thank you. I can anchor myself well. So you go to the Lutyens Bangalore zone party, and there's one chap who's standing like this, and he says, "What's the password?" And you say, "Password? Password? password. Maritime connectivity. And he beams and you go in and there are another 30, 40 people there who also only need this much, that maritime connectivity was a password. That's not going to be enough. As we deal with Singapore, as we deal with Vietnam, as we deal with ASEAN, we have to be more than that. What are the basic 6 elements we must know? Which ports do you want to connect? Any specificity in that? Which ports? Then, over what medium do you want to connect them? Is it riverine? Is it oceanic? Is it both? Is it digital? Is it all 3? What will move on that medium? Will it be ships? Will it be data packets? What will move? What will those platforms carry? Will they carry cargo? Will they carry human beings? Will they carry data streams? What will be carried? And only then can you move on to say what policies are you going to be putting in place for all of this. And so, when we look around us, and I'm now moving away from India, that our strategic what should we espouse? Should we espouse military alliances or should we espouse strategic partnerships? Strategic convergence with our partners is found in a variety of policy fields. And the number of these fields and the depth to which the strategic partnership convergence occurs, that is defining for ourselves a strategic hierarchy of partnerships. This is what it looks like. So at the bottom you have privileged, then you have strategic partnerships, then you have special strategic partnerships, you have comprehensive strategic ones, you have special and privileged ones, and the way you go from one level to another level is by increasing the number of policy fields and the depth to which that convergence is being found. So clear congruence actually exists between the functional framework of the Indo-Pacific perspectives of both ASEAN, that is the AIOP, which is an outlook, and the IPOI, of which I've already spoken. First, the centrality of ASEAN as a foundational principle, the predominance of dialogue and cooperation instead of rivalry. Vietnam is moving at the same pace as us, right? Sometimes they're moving faster. What should we do? Should we compete? Should we collaborate? Obviously, we should collaborate. What mechanisms should we devise in the maritime domain to collaborate? The pursuit of peace and stability as a prerequisite for prosperity, the pursuit of inclusive development and prosperity for all, the criticality of the maritime domain itself, the primacy accorded to inclusiveness, openness, transparency. Why don't India and China get along? Why can't we just say we'll compete? Because China comes with opacity into the Indian Ocean. It's like China and India, sir, are like 2 kids with a Pepsi can and 2 straws, right? We're both going to share this Pepsi can because it's the same markets and the same sources. And we're going to say, ready, 1, 2, 3. And in 5 seconds, one of us is going to say to the other guy, you're sucking harder than me. Never mind the connotations of the word sucking. Why is that? Why is that? Because it's a can, because it's opaque. It's not a glass. And when one country brings opacity to the table, in an economic situation, you move from competition to confrontation immediately. Then you worry about whether confrontation will go to conflict or not, separate issue. So, when we are talking to ASEAN, we are looking at cementing, sharing, imbibing, passing on a rules-based framework whose structural strength is drawn from consensus. Not from the fact that I'm the major power now, my rules will work. In this regard, Vietnam and Singapore are particular partners of ours. We don't care about what forms of government you have. We care about, do you respect one another? Do you have comity between nations? And do you have a rules-based order which will run? So there is great degree of importance given to the complementarity with existing ASEAN-led cooperation frameworks, such as the EAS, the ARF, the ADMM+, the expanded ASEAN Maritime Forum, and so on and so forth. Let me be more specific and end at that. These are areas, now the problem is that the ASEAN outlook on the Indo-Pacific is much more detailed than is the IPOI. So you have broad structures in the IPOI and details in the AOIP. And as you go to a maritime cooperation, you'll see a large number of these, as I've already mentioned: freedom of navigation, peaceful dispute settlement, maritime safety, promote maritime commerce, develop a blue economy, of which I've already spoken, address marine pollution, tackle marine debris, preserve and protect the environment, promote green shipping, protect the livelihood of coastal communities. Each one of these, each one represents a seminar. Each one represents activity that India should be doing. And we should be having these seminars which are gauging our progress. Not seminars in which we are saying, hello, darling, pass the scones. It's great to say, hello, darling, pass the scones for the first meeting. It's a terrible idea to say again and again, because now the darlings have gone, the scones have also gone. Now what should we do? And each of these represents opportunities for us, each one. So connectivity of connecting the connectivities. Trade connectivity, maritime transport, capacity building, resource sharing. There's no end to this. Let me go to examples of India and Singapore, for example. Let's take a look at Singapore's goals. We know our goals, we just showed them. These are Singapore's goals. At least we think these are Singapore's goals. And therefore we bounce them off Singapore and say, Vakei. And they said, yeah. In which case, we have connections which are available. How are these connections to be utilized? What about non-geoeconomic goals? Does Singapore not want territorial integrity and strategic depth despite geographic constraints? What about Vietnam? Vietnam, in dealing with China, is moving from problems of the 9-dash line, the 10-dash line, to the 4 Shahs. And the 4 Shahs are worse than the 10-dash line. So Vietnam has territorial integrity at the core of its maritime approach. It needs to, first of all, exist with its allotted zones in which it is free to carry out resource exploration, resource exploitation. Likewise, in the case of Singapore. What does India want then, finally, guys? What do we want in the maritime domain? What are our maritime goals? Our maritime goals are simply 4. Protect our territorial integrity. Support, maintain, and sustain regional peace and stability through a consensually derived rules-based order. Grow our economy and establish and maintain our reputation as a reliable and preferred security partner. Now you need strategies. Here is a case where I'm only going to show you a few of these and I'm stopping. Generate an enabling legal framework common between Singapore, Vietnam, India. Am I right, sir?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Promote maritime trade. For India, promote maritime trade under MIV 2030, Maritime Amrit Kal Vision 2047, Sagar Mala 2.0, and build mega ports in Vadhavan, build a mega port in Galatia Bay, and so on. What about Singapore? Singapore is developing Tuas mega port. Any chance of an exchange of geostrategies? How are you doing it? What are the problems you're facing? What can I do? Where should I build? Should I look at Tuas and have no manpower because Tuas is highly automated? Is that an answer for India? What do I do with the manpower that we have got? This is our strength. Why would we go for a port whose efficiency demands that we discard our manpower? Is that wise? Is that unwise? What should we do? Where are the debates? Who's having these debates? No EAS session, no session of the ARF should be complete without people throwing things at each other. Politely, of course. So saying that geostrategies need to be met. Look at Vietnam. Develop a synchronous and modern seaport system with 1.25 to 1.5 billion tons capacity by 2030. Which year are we in? How many years are left? In 4 years. If you want to do this kind of thing, it's even more ambitious than we are. So then, we want to build deep water ports. We want to do it in 4 years. Who's going to help you? I think India. Who's going to help India? I think Vietnam. And so if we don't help each other in these geostrategies, our geostrategies are going to, as they say, we must hang together, guys, because if we don't hang together, we will certainly hang independently. So connection of ports, India, connection of ports to the national infrastructure pipeline through all these Gati Shakti initiatives. What about Singapore? Port call, digital platforms, digital port at the rate of Singapore, next generation traffic management. What about Vietnam? Progressively digitizing its ports, port clearance versus via a national single window and ASEAN single window integration. We, in our maritime interaction, Isn't there obvious strategic congruence between us? What about the last one which I wanted to show? What about all these? All these are India's. How should we progress? Should we not have many, many such seminars? I know. Should we not have all of them? Here's Singapore. Here's this business of infrastructure. The blue dot certification signaling to people, don't buy cheap, miserable infrastructure which will collapse. Don't do this. Certify your infrastructure. That's what blue dot certification is. It was a joint project between the USA, Japan, and Australia, but in 2021, it morphed into what? Build Back Better World. In 2024, what it was that morphing into? The Partnership for Global Infrastructure and Investment. Great! The details. Listen to me. If we stay at 38,000 feet and have these grand views, you don't need a pilot. Anybody can fly a plane at 38,000 feet. The trick is how to make the plane land without crash and burn. How do you work the details of this? And in that regard, it is the job of organizations such as the RIS and the NMF to collaborate, partner with academia, and say, can we work the details? Because it's not enough for you to say that we're going to have a green shipping corridor. There is a huge amount of effort, huge number of details. Where are you going to get the hydrogen from? What will be the energy expenditure for saving energy? Will your energy expenditure to be able to get green energy be higher than the green energy? Then is that a wise idea? Should we build these giant windmills and do strip mining all over India? Should we do that? Is anybody else got a better idea? What about Singapore? What about Vietnam? Psst, Vietnam, any ideas? Would you like to share them with us? Maybe we don't have to be the Vishwa Guru all the time. We can sometimes be the Vishwa Shishya also. And so, guys, there are basically, if you look at non-geo-economic goals and the strategies for that, you can see secure critical maritime infrastructure by implementing the ISPS code. Designate submarine cables as critical infrastructure. India, where are we? Where is Singapore? Where is Vietnam? If all three are pushing, can't we get our legal act together? Can't we exchange information? Shouldn't we? Of course we should. And so, these are Singapore's geostrategies for non-geoeconomic goals. Those are India's geostrategies for non-geoeconomic goals. Let me give you at last 4 slides. There are 5 desired strategic maritime results common to India, Singapore, and Vietnam. The first of them, freedom of trade and navigation, and the concomitant security of the international shipping lanes within the Indo-Pacific. The second is the provision of holistic maritime security to the peoples of our countries. The third is encouraging a peaceful and transparent rise. Encourage a peaceful rise. If you want to stop China, it is not enough for you to have military wherewithal. The best way to stop China is to knit this region so tightly together that China does not have a strategic entry. That's how you do it. Fourth, sharing technologies and best practices for green port design, green port operations, green fuels, green navies. Cochin Airport, sir, is running entirely on solar power. It's the first and only airport on the planet Earth. Isn't that something to be proud about? And yet, we're not able to take that model and say, okay, how many ports of ours can we make in the same fashion? वो हो ही नहीं रहा. हम वाह वाह करे जा रहे हैं कोचिन के बारे में. And last but not the least, sharing technologies and best practices in terms of green ship design and the construction of warships and multi-purpose merchant vessels which are less. What should we do? Haven't you read all those papers? Haven't you seen those horrible movies in which all these whales are stranded on beaches, in which your heart bleeds? No? You've seen? What is happening? The acoustic habitat is being degraded. By what? By medium and low frequency noise. From where? From the noise of the engines of merchant ships. So therefore, what should we do? Should we reduce the number of merchant ships? Then less goods coming in, less goods going out, poorer economic growth. Should we increase the size of ships so that fewer ships but same amount of goods? Then should we build mega ports? Should we build Cape-sized vessels? What should we be doing? In other words, these are issues that must seize us. They must grip us. Our academic world must be effervescent with solution. I think your solution is horrible. I think it's great. All this tamasha must go on. Then and only then will India have a maritime security framework which is common to Vietnam, to Singapore, to ASEAN, and to India. Thank you very much for your attention. Presentation at that point.
Thank you very much, Admiral Chauhan. It was almost a mini encyclopedia on the Indo-Pacific. So comprehensive, so detailed. Of course, it was a very big picture. On every sentence he uttered, every word that he used, concept he used, there can be many, many seminars on each of them. So it is very vast, right? But I'm sure the curious minds may be raising different kind of questions. Security, is it there? Is it aspirational? Are there challenges? Who are the troublemakers? How to resolve those issues? Must be haunting your mind, right? Is there a rule-based order, or it is just an aspiration? Who are the violators of the rule, right? So this is a very complex issue, but before I ask my other panelists to say a few words, then open up, I would like to underline why Singapore and Vietnam were identified to have a discussion today. Vietnam is probably the most experienced and powerful military in ASEAN. Singapore, a tiny country, smaller than Delhi, in size and in population. It is the largest foreign investor in India. And then whether you think in terms of India-ASEAN trade or foreign direct investment, only Singapore dominates more than 80%, and we give the big name ASEAN. We are yet to diversify. But both these countries are so critical for India, partly because Vietnam and India have been consistently supporting each other's strategic view and vision, and we have a lot of convergence, right? And Singapore is really the key. Both Vietnam and Singapore are not great friends of Pakistan, whether economically or militarily. China, of course, everybody is trying to manage China. Vietnam is doing its own way. They are now having military relationship, but it's a different kind of military relationship, emergency and military medical issues and all that. Not the hardcore training and other kinds of cooperation we have with Vietnam. Right? Same with Singapore also. So when India looks at the security of this larger region, and we have our own challenges in the neighborhood, how these two countries are critical, that is important. And of course, the rest of the things, Vice Admiral Chauhan has so beautifully explained in his typical style. And I'm sure all of you must be having questions. Think about it, and let me now request Dr. Seshadri Chari to make a few observations.
What is the password for this? I have a suggestion for Government of India to begin with. They should not have allowed Vice Admiral Chauhan to retire, because serving Vice Admirals are not allowed to speak in seminars like this. So the risk is ours. DG RIS, Shrotriji, Vice Admiral, and Chintamani, Professor Chintamani Mahapatra. It was actually a very comprehensive and a very, very broad picture that Admiral has already painted. So there is very little to actually say. So basically, this is the year of ASEAN-India Maritime Cooperation 2026, which the Prime Minister declared. And it's a very broad idea, very big agenda, includes almost everything that we just saw in the presentation. And 12 months, or rather the rest of the 10 months, are very small period of window that we have to even complete 1% of what we are supposed to do. So it's very difficult, a very big agenda we have got. But then there are some areas where we already started working, and there are some areas which are actually we have to start looking more seriously. First of all, there are 7 areas. One is, of course, the freedom of navigation, which was said about it. And we are committed to freedom of navigation, and all the countries in the ASEAN groups are committed to freedom of navigation. But freedom of navigation is not just doing trade or doing business, but it is also insulating the country from what we call the prospective conflicts, because this region has several flashpoints, and a conflict in Myanmar can hold back freedom of navigation. A conflict in Bangladesh can do this. A conflict in any other area, even Malaysia, can do this. So we have to insulate that. And the second, of course, is the question of piracy. There have been incidents of piracy in Indian Ocean region, where India has played a very major role in curbing piracy. India has rescued 2 Chinese ships, merchant ships, and rescued them without any casualty on both sides. On China and India side, of course. The pirates were taken care of. And that brings us to the second issue of counter-terrorism. Yesterday, the government has announced the counter-terrorism doctrine. And the counter-terrorism doctrine specifically speaks of what the government has called as, the entire document is named PRAHAR. It's an acronym. There are several acronyms that this government is fond of. So this is the new one. We don't know, tomorrow something might come up. And the most important aspect of this project, PRAHAR, is counter-terrorism and also cyber security. But are these two enough? Should we not have a broader national security doctrine which will speak of other areas? The threat comes from non-military threats also. So what about tackling those non-military threats? And what about integrated threats? If the threats are integrated, we will have to have integrated solution also. So I think this counter-terrorism initiative is very good, but it requires further addition. So it has to also take into consideration the counter-terrorism mechanisms that we have to put in place. And counter-terrorism mechanisms are not exactly the same as security mechanisms. And we also saw about the Year of Maritime Cooperation has to look into the contribution that it can make to regional forums. Like ASEAN itself is there, East Asia Summit, or ASEAN Regional Forum, ARF. So these are, I'm not even including BIMSTEC and IORA, but we like IORA, we are the chair this time. We are also the chair of BRICS. So BRICS also plays an important role as far as this whole issue of maritime security is concerned. And India is at the pivot of South-South cooperation. That means we will have to look into not only the western part but also the eastern part. The fourth and the most important aspect of Year of Maritime Cooperation is going to be Indo-Pacific. ASEAN Indo-Pacific doctrine is available, India's Indo-Pacific doctrine is available. Independent Indo-Pacific doctrine of all these countries, ASEAN members are available, except probably China, which has just brushed off Indo-Pacific as not a very important, and they still continue to call it Asia-Pacific. Since 2015, it is Indo-Pacific. but we have been saying it. The centrality of India to Indo-Pacific is something that is being contested not by others but except one country. So that is the issue that we have to tackle. So we will have to have a joint Indo-Pacific security doctrine of ASEAN, India inclusive. And then we have also accepted, because we have accepted ASEAN centrality, India will have to work towards ASEAN centrality and also ASEAN unity. It's not just mere centrality that is important, but also ASEAN unity is going to be very important. And then 2022, the completion of 30 years of ASEAN-India Security Agreement, we had what we call the comprehensive strategic partnership agreement that was made in 2022, which speaks of larger areas of cooperation as far as the security aspects in the Indian Ocean and Pacific Ocean are concerned. Although we have not named Indo-Pacific, but CSP, that is Comprehensive Strategic Partnership Document, specifically mentions all these aspects. And the most important aspect of all these things, which had a fleeting reference, was China's claim in the South China Sea. So yes, they have a conflict with Vietnam, they have a conflict with Philippines, with Malaysia, with Brunei, and they also have a global lack of acceptance of global rules. So is it going to be a very different world from now onwards? We are already seeing interventions as far as the world order is concerned. So how is the new emerging world order going to move? And what is going to be the most important element as far as this world order is concerned? And what is going to be the contribution of the oceans, especially the Indian Ocean, the Pacific Ocean, and the confluence of these two oceans, which is, to borrow the terms of Shinzo Abe, the Indo-Pacific. So ultimately, all these issues are going to lead to Indo-Pacific. And will it be possible for us to come up with a document as far as Indo-Pacific is concerned and make it a institutionalized framework? It could be a debate, but then like the NMF and RIS will have to think in terms of suggesting a way forward as far as institutionalization of Indo-Pacific is concerned, which is not there at the moment. So land, air, water, space. This was mentioned, like the traditional Hindu philosophy of Panchabhuta. The soul is insulated from all these Panchabhutas, it seems. It is eternal. So what is going to be the eternal insulation for the soul of India? The eternal insulation for the soul of India is going to be all these factors leading to a strong security architecture between India and ASEAN. So that is going to be the idea. So I completely agree with Vice Admiral Chauhan, who has really given us a very broad picture. So there is not much to add. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Chari, for that insightful set of observations. I endorse your main recommendation that there should be an attempt to have a joint ASEAN-India, you can call it doctrine or statement or whatever. It is very, very important because all of you know that Chinese are cheesed off because of the Indo-Pacific concept. Russians don't recognize it. Even ASEAN was not very comfortable, by the way. Although we keep on talking about the convergence between India's Indo-Pacific strategy and their ASEAN outlook, all the ASEAN member countries don't support it even now. So as Indo-Pacific concept is evolving and the challenges are coming up and we need a common understanding, Dr. Chari's recommendation to have proper dialogue, debate, discussion, and come up with some kind of convergence of views on Indo-Pacific is the key. And thank you very much for that insightful set of observations, sir. May I request Dr. Shishir now to say a few words?
I will not
stand long between the audience and the password for this event. The password for this event, if I may reveal with the permission of Director General, is that dinner is served. By the way, with taking a clue from Admiral Chauhan's lecture, end state is very important, and since there are a lot of youngsters here, young research scholars, intermediary stage or end state of our blue economy, we are contributing only 4% contribution to GDP as part of the blue economy. The intermediary and the end state, if I may call, is 12% minimum. That is what is required. One more data I would like to just share it with you. As far as the growth is concerned, regional alliances are very important, and that is why we are here to discuss these regional alliances. The growth in the ASEAN region, one of the main drivers is the intra-regional trade, which is 25% between the ASEAN countries. And it is imperative on India and ASEAN to increase our trade. And one of the aspects of increasing this trade is near coastal voyages. So the young researchers should also look at the aspects of operationalizing these near coastal voyages, especially between closer ports like Sabang and many others. Well, the importance of financial and operational aspects of Singapore have been dwelt upon, and also the strategic and importance of energy and strategic aspects of Vietnam has also been dwelt upon. But more important is what is our capacity and what is our capability. I will again dwell on these two important things. As far as the capacity is concerned, India, of course, has some good capacities, especially in digital ocean observation. And we can do it together for India and ASEAN countries. That is the Global Ocean Observation Database that will be used, or that is being used in India for ocean state forecast through agencies like INCOIS or potential fishing zones, or for early warning, disaster management, etc. So this is a great prospect for cooperation between India and ASEAN. The second most important aspect of capability, which Admiral Chauhan mentioned, I would just like to highlight to the young audience, that ASEAN and India are very, of course, they are maritime nations, but we contribute a large part of the seafarer workforce. So in ASEAN, Philippines is the leading center in the world. So Philippines, Myanmar and Vietnam together contribute to close to 40% of the global seafarer workforce, and if you combine India, it makes it close to 50%. And for making this global workforce future ready, we need to train them in various aspects of the emerging challenges at sea. So that's an important aspect which I just wanted to mention to you. As part of the initiatives in the India-ASEAN Year of Maritime Cooperation, along with ASEAN India Center here with Dr. Pankaj Vishist and under the guidance of our Director General, we are coming out with some initiatives, and we are going to have a ports conclave, which is being supported by the Ministry of Port Shipping and Waterways and Ministry of External Affairs and our ASEAN partners. And we also intend to have a India-ASEAN hackathon, especially on the maritime cooperation. So I will close with these remarks. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Shishir, to touch upon even the trade issues. One of the significant ways of promoting maritime security would be to promote maritime trade. And we Indians should be aware that Vietnam sells more than $10 billion of goods to India, and we sell them less than $6 billion of trade. Same thing with the huge trade deficit we have vis-a-vis Singapore and ASEAN as a whole. One of the best ways to promote more and more dialogue on maintaining, in a way, some kind of balanced, equitable trade between the two that can also lead to security cooperation ultimately. Thank you very much. We'll have some time for Q&A, so I'm sure all of you have listened to the main speech by Admiral Chauhan and the comments as well. If anybody has any question, yes, please, next up. Should be brief and to the point.
Thank you, Admiral. It was really very comprehensive talk. I just pick up the questions from the drawbacks Professor Chintamani said, that we have huge deficit with these two countries also. Also, as Admiral Ji has said, that we must clinch all together with all the ASEAN countries so that we can keep China a little bit at bay. But China has already there, they have made very strong naval base at RIM, at Cambodia Air Base. Cambodia, the southern part. And that is a great concern for Thailand and Vietnam. At the same time, Malacca Straits is the largest sea lane, where Indonesia takes the majority of the claim. And also we are building Sawang Airport. So you have not mentioned, I mean, you have only identified Singapore and Vietnam. So this is a little bit concerning for me that, there is huge deficit and you are thinking to have a very comprehensive maritime security with only these two countries you have identified, so little bit.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any other question? Oh, sorry.
Thank you. So just a brief question. India is working on the Galathea Bay port, and what kind of response have we got, if any, from Singapore now that the NGT has cleared the issues which were around ecological and environmental aspects of this port in Andaman and Nicobar? One more pointed question, that India is now endeavoring to build a ship, a warship or a submarine every 40 days. So we have the kind of capacity, and I mean, really where, again, as you said, end state, where is this really taking us? So are we trying to focus more on our deterrence capabilities, or are we really kind of trying to provide security as we want, that India should be seen as a security maritime partner for the smaller countries in our neighborhood? Thank you so much.
Thank you. Professor Mohanty?
Admiral Chauhan, your presentations are always fascinating and also create all the time some kind of controversies. Your two India concept continue to be very interesting for some time. We understand the blue economy to some extent, but the bluing up economy is not properly understood. If you can explain.
Maybe one or two more questions before I ask the...
Yeah, so thank you, sir, for the amazing talk. Just a quick question is, something that we all observed is, when it comes to the Indo-Pacific framework that India has, like in terms of how we look at our strategy in the Indo-Pacific, China does not like it, Russia does not recognize it, and ASEAN is not very comfortable with it. And therefore, when we engage with the other ASEAN nations for other aspects, such as the Indo-Pacific economic framework, where we're trying to build resilience, not in maritime, just in terms of goods, capacity building, etc., we run into trouble. So how is a maritime security cooperation going to have an impact on that?
Okay. Last question, somewhere there. Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. I'm Rahul Mishra from the Indo-Pacific Center, JNU. Vice Admiral Chauhan, always a delight to listen to you and your engaging talk. I have two questions. First, you gave a list of India's strategic partnerships, and I thought you're indicating that this is one of the parameters how we evaluate our partnerships. Now, my question is from a country where I worked for 7 years. India and Malaysia have a comprehensive strategic partnership, and there is no defense trade procurement agreement with them. There is the issue of Zakir Naik and a lot of unsettled questions. So how do you respond to this layering of partnerships? Second, you mentioned that India and ASEAN should work together on the maritime front. I'd like to bring your attention to the Malacca Patrols, Eye in the Sky, which has Singapore, Indonesia, and Malaysia. India has been trying since 2005 to become one of the, at least, if not a member, at least an observer. But none of these countries have given a clear response to what India should do. On the Vietnam question, Vietnam, even though a very good friend and partner, has a 3+3 mechanism with China, the only mechanism that involves defense, military, economy, and diplomacy. So how do we engage that? In India's capacity shortfall, 20 years, maybe 25 years, since Sitwe and Kaladan ports have been in, work in progress. And I do hope they build it and operate it before I retire, which is less than 20 years. So how do we address the capacity shortfall? Thank you.
Okay. There are 10 questions and 5 minutes, sir.
Well, okay, here goes. Let me start with the issues of Cambodia and the Riam naval base and the problems there. The NMF has written extensively about this, but we do not find that the Riam naval base built by China has any real military implications, because the proximity of their to their own bases is quite large. But it doesn't mean that we're not keeping track of it. And your complaint that I only mentioned 2 countries is because I only was given that much time. If you expand the time, we will be able to incorporate all 11 countries of ASEAN. Not all of which we have strong relationships with. The issue of Malacca, it's quite important to understand Malacca. It has come up in more than one context. Malacca Strait is not capable of being blockaded or blocked or something. It is a strait used for international navigation, and there is nobody who will be able to block it. What is possible, however, is targeting becomes easy, because all ships have to go through a narrow gateway, and therefore you are able to target. You are able to identify a start point, and then you are able to target them better. Targeting does not have to lead to actual interdiction, but it just means that you know where things are if they are moving through the Strait of Malacca. The Chinese use this Malacca dilemma. Let me disabuse you of the notion that it is talking about Malacca Strait. It is not talking about the Strait of Malacca. It is talking about all straits through which, as choke points, Chinese trade or anybody else's trade must go. Finally, you never hear, why don't you hear of Japan saying there's a Malacca dilemma? Why don't you hear South Korea saying there's a Malacca dilemma? Why only China? Because China doesn't have any friends. If your only friends are Pakistan and North Korea, you don't need enemies. So the point I'm trying to make is that the Malacca issue is an important issue. It needs to be discussed at length, but it isn't specifically a make-break issue here. With regard to Galatia Bay, ma'am, there are significant challenges in Galatia Bay. Let me give you a simple question that I've asked many people without much response, and that is that how many skilled people do you need to run a port? Do you have an answer? Is it 6 people, 60 people, 600 people, 6,000 people? How many people? And if you are looking at some figure like 60,000 people of skill, where are those people going to come from? Are they available in Car Nicobar, in Nicobar Islands? So will they not come from the mainland? And if they come from the mainland, what will be the socio-economic impact and the socio-cultural impact? And therefore, what will it do to your business model? What is the response of Singapore? Singapore has the port of Singapore, which is the, in the top 5 ports of the world. And Singapore was once equally stressed at one point in time by developments in Malaysia and the Tanjung port. But in the case of Galatia Bay, I think Singapore has taken quite a wise stand that we're not going to compete with you. We don't mind collaborating with you. And there are easy ways of collaborating by selecting what types of cargo each of you will handle. But Galatia Bay, apart from its environmental clearance issue, has many issues still in the pipeline. Our approach sometimes seems to be that, how does it matter? We are a landlord port model. We are the landlord. Let the private enterprise or the private player who's in the terminal worry about its success or failure, which I find is a bit odd, because if it were, God forbid, to fail, I mean, we didn't have great success with Balarpadam, if you remember. And if we had another failure, would India's reputation not suffer? And if it did suffer, then India has to be able to respond there. Deterrence and safety and ships being built every 40 days. It is true that ships are being built every 40 days. It is true that this is in fact, less than 40 days. It is a major achievement. Not all these ships are high-end combat platforms, but all of them are important vessels. And so each ship that is being built is not detracting from the economy. Each time you build a warship, and every 1 rupee you spend on building the warship, 8 rupees goes back into the economy. So I think that the more ships you build, the better it is, because this is a comparative advantage that you have over almost all countries in the region. So where are we going with this? Are we looking at deterrence or are we looking at security? I think that we are looking at security, we are looking at deterrence at the same time, because our overall security is impacted by a certain number of players. What is our aim? Our aim is to have a neighborhood in which there are more neighbors and less hoods. And therefore, our effort is to try and move everybody up this particular prosperity chain. And if in the process we are able to build our own security, so much the better. Blue economy and 4%, Professor Mahapatra. You and I have had many discussions on this subject. I am not contesting the business of, I'm just trying to say that unless we are able to bring natural accounting into the framework, you will not be able to have a good calculation for GDP. Let me give you one quick example which you're familiar with. Let's say that there's a factory, it's on the coast, and it is, you're able to calculate the value of the factory, the value of the people, the value of the goods produced, the value of the machinery, but the factory is discharging untreated waste into the ocean. Are you subtracting that? How are you subtracting it? What monetary value have you given to that? If we have a mangrove forest, is the value that we afford to add to our GDP going to be the value of the wood or the value of the carbon it sequesters? And if it is the carbon it sequesters, how does the monetary valuation take place? So when we are talking about the blue economy and its percentage contribution, although Commodore Strotia mentioned 4%, I think that this is a mistake. There are no sectors of the blue economy. The whole economy must be blued. And that is why it's important to go to the blue economy is not the ocean economy. It is not how much fish or how many items are rescued from that. In the Indo-Pacific strategy, our strategy in the Indo-Pacific. First of all, I want to disabuse you of the fact that we have, for India, the Indo-Pacific is not a strategy. Let me say that again. For India, the Indo-Pacific is not in and of itself a strategy. For India, the Indo-Pacific is a strategic geography. And in that strategic geography, India has a multitude of strategies. For USA, the Indo-Pacific under some administration might well have been a strategy, but USA is a sovereign country. And it can call whatever it wants. So can we. So when we talk about China and Russia, I think I will take exception to, or at least I will disagree with all the learned members of our panel. It is true that the official documentation generated by both China and Russia they abjure the word Indo-Pacific. Neither country in its academic and its think tank interactions has any qualms in using Indo-Pacific. They all use it. And if you look at these autocracies, no think tank is free in China or Russia. So what China does is it uses its think tanks to float trial balloons and see what happens. What happens domestically? What happens internationally? And I go to China even now adequate number of times. Sometimes I return in one piece and sometimes in two. But at no stage have I heard an abhorrence to the word Indo-Pacific. This is true. It was the case 5 or 7 years ago. It was the case. But if you look at Russia, for example, there is Pacific Russia. Look at the problems that Russia is facing. Sooner or later, the war in Ukraine will come to an end in one fashion or another fashion. There is a central problem. Who will call the shots in Russia? Who will be Russia? Will it be Moscow? Will it be Vladivostok? And if it is Vladivostok, the chances of it becoming Vladivostok increase every time, or for as long as sanctions are imposed upon Russia, and Vladivostok is the central point for the movement of energy across into China. So I don't think that there is any problem in the future of both these powers accepting this. One, because Russia recognizes that Asia Pacific, Russia is not it's not a continental power, full stop. It is a continental and a maritime power. India is a continental and maritime power. Actually, India is a reluctant maritime power. Our economy is taking it, screaming and kicking into becoming a maritime power. It's our economy. And likewise is the case with China. So I think that is what I wanted to say about that. I know that the questions are many and the answers are not adequate to satisfy you. Rahul, thank you very much for all those polite comments. India and its strategic partnership and the hierarchy of strategic partnerships, it would be nice, first of all, to believe that India has some grand plan in which this emerged. This is all rubbish. This happens, and then you put a spin on it. So the number of policy fields, that is not to say a strategic partnership is to be viewed in the same manner as a military strategic partnership. Strategic partnership is reflected by the number of policy fields, science and technology, education, the liberal arts, dance, agriculture, shipbuilding, ship design. Each one is a policy field. Now, in some cases, we have rich interaction in breadth, but not in depth. In some, we have great interaction in depth, but not sufficient breadth. So willy-nilly, we end up with a hierarchy, even though we didn't plan on one. And finally, I wanted to say that international relations is not only about these grand strategic thinking in academia or in think tanks. It is very often a personality has an inordinate influence, even if it's a transient one, upon this. So if somebody says that now so-and-so is visiting and that relationship should be elevated to X or Y, it gets elevated, but it doesn't have enough grounding. So I think with India and Malaysia in specific terms, India has made efforts continuously for both Indonesia and Malaysia. Of the two, if you ask me as a naval officer, I will tell you straight out that if you meet an Indonesian, marry him. Worry about his gender later on. Because he's that important, because they sit astride every single choke point that connects the Indian Ocean and the Pacific Ocean. They are our largest supplier of coal. They are now our largest supplier. There is a huge amount of interaction with Malaysia. What about Malaysia? Malaysia is not an Islamic republic, but Malaysia has chosen to be quite Islamic. Indonesia is and has chosen to be more liberal. We are now bending over backwards to be able to accommodate Malaysian sensitivities, to assuage them, to understand them. And for a long time, this has been the case. So your view that India has not made effort in Malaysia, I can say with personal awareness that that is not the case. And it is no longer the case either. After all, we have had a very high profile degree of cooperation with Malaysia. Now, everybody doesn't have to buy your ships. Everybody doesn't have to buy your missiles. It's a function of every country has a choice. And so Malaysia's choice is respected by us. We think Malaysia's port infrastructure is worthy of emulation. And so it's not just Singapore that we must talk to. We must talk to Port Klang. We must talk to the Malaysian ports because they are success models of a major magnitude. So I don't think that we are in any way uninvolved with Malaysia. MSSI and the Malacca Strait Patrols was your last point. Okay, first of all, when we talk about anti-piracy, we must appreciate that piracy can only occur in international waters. It cannot occur in the territorial waters of a country or the territorial sea of a country. If you take the Strait of Malacca, apart from the northern funnel, if you take the Strait of Malacca and the Strait of Singapore, and you draw arcs of 12 nautical miles from each coast, you can argue, or they will argue, as to whose 12 miles it is. But it is somebody's. And therefore, in that 12 miles, you can have armed robbery, but you cannot have piracy. So India's involvement in this particular thing is that we are not able to enter this Malacca Strait Patrol on an anti-piracy issue, which is how it started. We are able to enter, and we shouldn't worry too much, because now from Port Blair, and given the aerial assets that we currently have, airborne, both manned and crewed and uncrewed assets. We are in a position to be able to pass information of genuine value without trying to get ourselves involved in this particular mess of physical presence. I think that that would be a wiser idea than any other. I'll stop there. Thank you so much.
Ladies and gentlemen, the audience could provoke Vice Admiral Chauhan adequately. And I'm sure all of you benefited a great deal from the way he answered all the questions. I'll just say one sentence about the future. You know, in the past, in ancient India, we heard about something called Samudra Manthan, churning of the ocean. The way resources are being depleted, the entire focus is going to the outer space or the ocean. Manthan is going to be more and more. There will be Devtas, there will be Danavs, and we need some Shivji to drink the poison and protect everyone, right? So this field is going to grow in times to come. Difficult days are ahead, but we must prepare for the future. I'm sure you'll agree with me that after listening to Vice Admiral Chauhan and of course my co-panelist, all of us are now a little wiser, a little more wise, a little more knowledgeable on the field than before when you walked into the room. Thank you very much for listening to all of us. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. I think it was a fascinating lecture and followed by equally fascinating question-answer session. So on the behalf of RIS, I would like to formally thank our dear Admiral Chauhan for taking out time from his busy schedule and joining us today for this lecture. I would also like to thank Professor Mahapatra, who kindly agreed to chair the session. I am also grateful to Chari sir and our own Director General RIS, Professor Sachin Kumar Sharma, for extending all support for this event. Since we are running late, we would be having dinner, but before that, we have a token of appreciation for our guests. So may I request our team to please, I'll request our Director General to please felicitate first our Speaker of the Day, Admiral Chauhan.
Thank you. Thank you.
I will say the password is unstoppable.
Mahapatra sir. Chari sir. Sir. May I request all the panelists to join for a group photo? And for audience, we have dinner downstairs in front of Habitat Hub. Please join us for the dinner after the photo. Thank you so much.